Thank you very much. All right, so we're ready. I'm opening the meeting now, calling it to order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. The committee is meeting for the purpose of committee business. En regard de la liste des gens qui veulent intervenir, eh bien,
With regard to the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members. Madam Clerk, are there any replacements, and which members are in person in the meeting room, please? Okay, we have the pleasure of having member Blaney here in the room, and we have no replacements today. Fine, thank you very much. Well, look, we have 6 meetings left after this one until the end of the session, because we're sitting twice a week until the end of this session. So today is our 6th meeting of committee business. So we're going to attempt to prioritize one or more studies so as to have the time to give the clerk time to invite witnesses. For time being, we have 2 motions that were approved and 10 motions that we must debate. So you have the floor on the list right now. I don't know if there are any in the room, but on screen I have Ms. Latanzio, Mr. Généreux, Ms. Lalonde, and Mr. Arsenault who want to intervene. So, Ms. Latanzio, point of privilege, Mr. Chairman. What did you say? Point of privilege, Mr. Chairman. I see. Go ahead. As we saw in the past few days, the House of Commons, some of my colleagues in opposition have asked the Prime Minister to put an end to my mandate at the Official Languages Committee. For the past few days, the media have scrutinized the question I put to the Commissioner of Official Languages last Friday. I'd like to take the time today to address this issue more carefully. First of all, the question I put to Mr. Theberge was what, according to him, are the causes of the decline of the French language in the province of Quebec. Looking at the video of my question the next morning, I realized the way I put the question was insensitive and awkward. That's why I apologized. I know that apologizing in writing does not show the sincerity of the message. So today, I'd like to apologize completely to anyone I offended with my question, or rather the way I put the question. The reality is, I love the French language. When I go into businesses in my riding, I always start the conversation in French. I was a teacher before I got into politics, and I taught in French. I think it's unacceptable that Francophone Quebecers cannot receive service in their own language in the province of Quebec. This is a province with one official language, which is French. We all have an obligation to protect it. I read parts of the Léger poll last weekend, and I saw that the majority of young Quebecers between 18 and 34 are not disturbed by the language in which they're served, and unfortunately, I think that's a problem, Mr. Chairman. As a member of Parliament, it's our role to ask important questions, even difficult questions sometimes, in order to get testimony that allows us to produce a report and recommendations that push us in the right direction. I've been on this committee for 2 years, and I've always done my best to protect both official languages in our country, as well as the rights of minorities, Francophones outside Quebec and Anglophones in Quebec, and to protect the French language as a minority language on this continent, in this country. As a history teacher, it would break my heart to see the beautiful French language disappear from our country. And to protect it, we must make sure that French remains strong in Quebec. Now, having said that, As we look for ways to protect French in Quebec and Montreal, we almost must remember that the language rights of minority communities must be respected. The vast majority of people I know in the Anglophone community do speak French. I'm talking of big people of my generation. So the two communities have to work together to put an end to this decline. Having been very affected by the reactions since last Friday and understanding the sensitivity of these words, I'd like to inform you, Mr. Chairman, that I wish to quit my position within this committee at the end of this meeting. Please rest assured that I will do everything to stop the decline of French in Quebec while protecting the rights of the Anglophone community, and I would work on its progression not only in Quebec but throughout Canada. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Lambropoulos. Before I make my decision on this intervention, I'd like to take a few seconds to consult the clerk, please. So, dear members, I'm suspending the session for a few seconds.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Okay, point of order, but I would just like to conclude with this point of privilege, and then I will give you the floor directly. After having consulted the clerk, Ms. Lambropoulos' intervention does not qualify as a point of privilege. So the whip has the responsibility of choosing members sitting on committees. Furthermore, the Official Languages Committee does not have the power to accept or to hear that intervention by Ms. Lambropoulos. And I would remind members that that intervention was non-debatable also. Now, Mr. Généreux, point of order. Thank you, Mr. Chair, to have given me the floor. I have a few things. First, you had asked me to lower my hand at the beginning of the meeting or right before the meeting began, and that's what I did. I'm trying to remember the name of, or rather the first person who you named to speak, my colleague. my colleague raised her hand. Ms. Latanzio. She raised her hand immediately at the moment where she started speaking without having been recognized officially. So I would like to be given permission to speak first because I raised my hand before her. Secondly, we are in a public meeting. We are not in camera, unless I'm mistaken. We are in public, that is correct. That means that the point of privilege was not webcast. I would therefore like for Ms. Lambropoulos to redeliver her point of privilege. You did say that it wasn't a point of privilege, but in that case, I would like to give her the privilege or the pleasure to redeliver her presentation, her speech that she just gave us, so that it may be webcast, so that it may be public, so that everyone who wishes to access it may, because it was cut out of the recording at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. I have two takeaways from what you just said. Firstly, regarding Ms. Latanzio, and secondly, regarding Ms. Lambropoulos. And to that effect, together with the clerk, I will need to suspend once again, because as you know, we are in a hybrid sitting. And I asked at the beginning of the meeting whether there were people in the room, and if they raised their hand, that is when the clerk will let me know that they have raised their hand so that I can maintain a fair order. And that is the way the clerk and I are managing things. And at this time, she's asking me to suspend the meeting so that we can take care of this. So I will suspend the meeting.
resuming this meeting. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Well, look. All right. Could you wait for me 30 seconds so I can answer the point of order by Mr. Généreux? Mr. Généreux, I understand why you asked. It's at the discretion of the chair to choose who will speak next. We had discussed all this at Internal Economy. We decided that once the meeting is started, that's when we have to do it. I understand that you intended at the outset to intervene, and perhaps the clerk was busy. So on this, I do agree, after the point of order, to give you the floor. I'm told that with regard to Parview, the entire intervention by Ms. Lampropoulos was broadcast, so it's not necessary for her to start over. Once again, I'm calling on your indulgence, everyone, when it comes to raising your hand in the meeting room and on computer so that we can respect everyone's right to speak. So, point of order, Ms. Lalonde, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, look, I'm very disappointed. I understand that my honorable colleague had not received the words that our colleagues shared with us, but I find it rather unpleasant. Of course, I saw it. I'm a bit surprised that his conservative team was not in a position to see that this was in fact broadcast to all Canadians, and I want to thank my colleague for what she said. I know it wasn't easy. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. So, now speaking order now. First, Mr. Généreux, you have the floor now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind my colleague, Ms. Lalonde, that the intervention I made on Ms. Lampropoulos' speech at the beginning of the session was that all Canadians must be well informed. And at the time I asked for this, the broadcast was not online yet. Or if it was, it's a question of seconds, really. So let's move on here and look forward. I'd also like to thank Ms. Lampropoulos for her comments. I think it's important that we have a mea culpa when the time comes and things like this happen. I think it's in her honor that she did this and make the decision she made. Now, having said that, Mr. Chairman, I think that we're prepared to go on to something else, and I would ask for adjournment and a vote on the adjournment on the motion by Mr. Beaulieu, and I agree with him completely with this motion. I think that we must go on to committee business. Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question first. Go on, Mr. Généreux. Well, I'll shorten what I have to say here, but I'm asking for adjournment so that we can vote on this as quickly as possible so that we can move forward with our work. I know we have a lot on the table. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. Before I go on to other speakers, I must also say that the last time we put an end to this sitting, we adjourned the meeting. There is no motion technically to be discussed. So that's why I'm opening the meeting, calling it to order, so that a member can propose a motion. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm here in person, and I asked for the floor, please. I did not understand, Mr. Blaney, I'm sorry. I just wanted to indicate that this is the first time that I participate in the committee in person when it's virtual. I don't have a computer in front of me. I couldn't raise my hand that way, but I'd like you to know that I requested to take the floor, and I indicated my intention to table a motion. All right. Mr. Chairman, I asked for a point of order. Point of order, Mr. Beaulieu. I simply want to know, given what you said earlier, whether Ms. Lampropoulos spoke with her whip before she made her decision. Mr. Beaulieu, That is a question that I've already decided about. It's not debatable. I have no information about what's going on with her whip, unfortunately. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. In order to clarify this, could you tell us what is the list of speakers here? I understand what Mr. Blaney said, but everyone gets a turn, and I hope that the order is being respected. Yes, thank you, Ms. Latanzio. That's exactly what I was trying to do. On this list, with the clerk in the committee room, I have you, Ms. Latanzio, then I have Ms. Lalonde, Mr. Blaney, Mr. Arsenault, and Mr. Beaulieu. So while you're at it, Ms. Latanzio, go ahead, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues. I'm very eager to have us continue our business today, given that the last meeting had to be cancelled. Mr. Chairman, recently, at their second to last meeting, we had the Commissioner of Official Languages, Mr. Theberge, present, who presented his report and recommendations with regard to official languages. My colleagues will recall that on October 13th, we adopted my motion, which referred to the impact study about COVID with regard to the capacity of the federal government to provide information to Canadians in both official languages. So today, Mr. Chairman, I'd like us to go forward. At some point, the committee has to start working. So I am very eager to dispose with that request, that motion. So, Mr. Chairman, we're in the second wave of this pandemic. It has not stopped. The difficulties continue. They still exist. I think that in some provinces and regions of our beautiful country, the transmission of this communication is something that continues to be difficult. This issue must be broached because the pandemic has repercussions from an economic standpoint, but especially on the health and safety of our fellow citizens. So the commissioner had made a point about the fact that his observations were that there were deficiencies in communications to citizens during the pandemic. There is an urgent need. We have to deal with this motion, study it, and have an opportunity to hear witnesses come before us and tell us how things happened during the pandemic and what we can do better to remedy the difficulties that have been experienced by Canadians. At this stage, Mr. Chairman, I know that right now we're operating as a subcommittee, and I want us to dispose with these issues of the process so that we can go forward. I understand from your opening statement during this meeting that we have 6 meetings left. Is that correct? Yes, correct. Absolutely. All right. So I had seen the proposal by one of my colleagues to the effect that she had suggested 5 meetings to examine how COVID impacted transmitting information in our minority language communities. So what I would propose, Mr. Chairman, is that we can go forward and immediately set the next 5 meetings dedicated to that particular issue. And secondly, Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering also how we manage the witnesses, because I imagine it's the clerk who has to send the invitations to stakeholders, to witnesses. Since this is my first time at this committee since the beginning of this mandate, so how does that work? The clerk sends an invitation, and what is the deadline? How is this managed when it comes to the deadline? When must we submit a list of potential witnesses? Who does the invitations, and what is the timeline between the time we submit a list of potential witnesses and when we can begin the work of this process? So I'm opening a parenthesis here, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking this question, and as soon as I have an answer, I'd like to continue with this intervention. Well, thank you, Ms. Latanzio, but I understand it's a motion. The motion was adopted, and now you're talking about 5 meetings. I would also ask the clerk to specify, before we start a debate on your intervention, I'd like to hear how long it takes her to invite witnesses if ever we began such a study. Madam Clerk, please. Well, it's up to the committee to decide on the deadline for submitting a list of potential witnesses, but ideally, I need a week at least to invite the witnesses. So that has to be taken into account.
So, Mr. Chair, if I'm understanding, and I don't mean to interrupt you, if members are asked to send a list by, say, next Tuesday, we would then be able to start hearing witnesses on the following Tuesday. Is that correct? Ms. Latanzio, you had tabled a motion, so I would like to allow members to debate that motion. And after that debate, members will be able to decide how they would like to proceed. I have a point of order, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Blaney, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is very simple. We have already adopted Ms. Latanzio's motion. We have agreed on discussing that issue. I know that we had agreed on an informal meeting, and I think that we should be able to have a conversation and then do a wrap-up. But for the moment, what I'm understanding is that Ms. Latanzio wants to bring to our attention that her subject was tabled, and it's a valid subject because we adopted that motion. I think that we should debate the proceedings. Thank you, Mr. Blaney. As you very well said, Ms. Latanzio's motion was adopted. Point of order, Mr. Arsenault. There is distortion. Yes, I hear it as well. Yes, there is a lot of distortion. Please excuse me. I will have to suspend to fix the technical problems. Sorry, I will have... So we will start the meeting again. I know that Mr. Arsenault had a point of privilege, but first, let's finish Mr. Blaney's point. As you said, Mr. Blaney, the original motion was adopted, but now a new motion is on the table for this meeting. Therefore, we must listen to different points of view on this motion. So Mr. Arsenault had a point of privilege. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for clarifying. That was exactly what my question was about. Since we are now going to debate this, should we now raise our hands? And those who wish to speak specifically on that, should people re-raise their hand? Is that the way it is going to work? Yes. The way it will work is that I have a number of hands already raised on the list. And I imagine that those people may or may not have wished to speak on this motion. If they didn't wish to speak on this motion, it would be better if you unraised your hand, and then we will speak to this motion specifically. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Ms. Lalonde. I would just like to ascertain that the chronological order will be respected after we debate Ms. Latanzio's motion. I want to make sure that I will be the next to speak after we finish debating the directives that Ms. Latanzio wants to apply to her motion. Ms. Lalonde, I hear your point of order, but please understand that it is very difficult for the clerk and I to manage the list, not knowing how long the debate on Ms. Latanzio's motion will last. So, dear colleagues, it is preferable for you to unraise your hand if you didn't wish to discuss this motion. Here is my speaking list. I have Ms. Lalonde, Mr. Blaney, Mr. Arsenault. Unfortunately, Mr. Dubourg, Mr. Arsenault is telling me that the sound is deteriorating again. Yes, the same is true for me. Unfortunately, we are having technical difficulties. Is it really impossible to follow the proceedings? Ms. Lalonde. Well, what I would like would be for the clerk to keep a list of hands that were already raised. And then we can unraise our hand, and then after this debate, if there is time left, we can go back to that same chronological order if possible. Ms. Lalonde, as you know, anything can be done with the consent in a committee. So now, I have a point of order as well. Yes, Mr. Beaulieu, your point of order. If I wish to intervene on that motion, and I also wish to speak about another motion. Yes, I see, I understand. Dear colleagues, what I'm asking is for you to unraise your hands now. I have noted down the order. That means that you will now be able to raise your hand to speak on Ms. Latanzio's motion regarding the 5 meetings. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it's just me, but in my earpiece, and I think my colleagues are expressing that they are having the same problems. The sound is terrible, even though I unplugged and plugged back in my headset. Yes, the same is true for me, Ms. Lalonde. Ms. Lalonde, could we please take a few moments to consult with the technical team because it is very unpleasant? Yes. My apologies again, colleagues. We will do everything in our power to come back as quickly as possible. So once more, I will suspend the sitting.
will resume the meeting. So, please excuse us for the technical problems. According to the new list of speakers, I have Mr. Généreux, Ms. Lalonde, Mr. Beaulieu, and Mr. Arsenault who want to speak on the motion of 5 meetings and what Ms. Lattanzio proposed. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll reiterate what I said earlier because I'm confused now, really. There are things, the motion's here, the motion's not here. I wanted adjournment insofar as you explained that once we had adjourned the last meeting, automatically Mr. Beaulieu's motion fell aside. Is that correct? Okay, I see one person saying yes, no, you're saying no. No, I wanted to say that the last meeting, the one before the meeting with the Official Languages Commissioner, was one where we adjourn. In a situation where we adjourn, not suspend, at that point, we start up again with the motions that we want to study. Okay. So, in that case, can I share my time with Mr. Blaney? Is that possible? Good question, eh? I think that was never requested. No, because I know we don't have a determined time to speak here, and I have other people on the list. So perhaps you could transmit what you have to say through Mr. Blaney or vice versa. Okay, that's fine. Look, I'll allow others to speak because I don't want to take up time pointlessly, but I or Stephen will speak again later. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. So now, Ms. Lalonde has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, look, I do appreciate the speech by my colleague, Ms. Lattanzio. I think that it's important to go forward with concrete meetings to conduct a study before the end of this session. The relevance of her motion that we'd all supported does deserve study as quickly as possible. So I believe my colleague, and Patricia, I want to confirm, you were asking for 5 meetings for that particular study? I don't exactly know. Together with the clerk, I know that we had come up with a list by Tuesday. Perhaps by tomorrow we could have a list. I know that that's brief, but next Tuesday perhaps we could hear witnesses and start working on this excellent motion. I would like my colleagues to agree. Madam Clerk, I know that you're not going to smile at my request, but I'd like us to proceed as quickly as possible and have our witnesses for Ms. Lattanzio's issue. So I'd like us to have a list sent to the clerk by tomorrow to see who could appear on Tuesday. Okay. I will. Thank you, Ms. Lalonde. I'll give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu because your intervention is within the framework of our discussion. We can debate when we can ask for witnesses, but there's no other motion that affects this meeting, this motion about 5 meetings. Mr. Beaulieu, I give you the floor. Yes, on the one hand, I think we should vote against this priority. I understand that Ms. Lattanzio is proposing putting this as a priority and making her motion a priority. When we had an informal meeting, that's not what we were aiming at. I don't understand why she doesn't want us to examine the situation of French in Quebec. I think that the issue of the pandemic is one where the Commissioner of Official Languages conducted a study. He made a presentation. Now we're going to redo another study about the pandemic. I don't think that's really relevant. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to finish, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Beaulieu, Madame Lattanzio. I think my colleague is attempting to put words in my mouth. I wasn't saying when I began today's meeting that I said that one issue had a greater priority than another. I'm trying to put this process before us that the motion I proposed on October 13 was adopted by all my colleagues. So this motion is adopted, Mr. Chairman. All I'm trying to do is manage this motion. It's not a matter of making a decision and prioritizing one motion over another. The other motion that my colleague is talking about hasn't been debated yet. It hasn't been adopted yet. So I think it's essential that we be clear about that and not put words in my mouth. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lattanzio. Mr. Beaulieu, you can continue. Well, if I didn't understand her point of order, but it's interesting anyway. I understand that her proposal is not to prioritize, because if she's saying send us lists of witnesses by tomorrow and all that, if we prioritize other proposals, it may not be a good idea to start tomorrow. It's in that sense that I was making my point. I think we should probably wait. The motion we voted on did not have a date in it. Yes, I understand your intervention, Mr. Beaulieu. It's up to the committee to decide on the calendar of meetings of the committee. I want to point out as well that the clerk informs me that if we did prioritize one of the motions for study, we would have to have a list of witnesses tomorrow at the latest so that she can do what's necessary to invite the witnesses and have them appear on Tuesday. Well, a point of order. You've just said that it's up to the committee or the subcommittee to decide on the priorities. Well, look, in our procedures, the subcommittee can meet, but you must understand that the subcommittee has to report to the committee. The report has to be verified, translated, and in that situation, we would be losing a complete meeting. So I think the objective today is to see whether we could proceed with establishing a timetable for our coming meetings. Well, if there is no date in her proposal, are we voting on amendments to the proposal? Right now, we're debating the motion about 5 meetings for Ms. Lattanzio's motion. Well, wasn't that already in her motion? If not, it's an amendment. It's an amendment to her motion that we are debating. So that's it for clarification. On the list, I have Mr. Arsenault, Mr. Blaney, Ms. Lambropoulos, Ms. Lalonde, and Mr. Digid. Mr. Arsenault, you have the floor. Well, dear brothers and sisters, Mr. Chairman, you've just shed light on all this. I understood my colleague Beaulieu was confused because I was too. We all remember that we voted unanimously on Ms. Lattanzio's motion, the one Mr. Beaulieu is referring to. It's a fusion of 3 motions. We haven't even agreed on the content or the wording. Okay, we understand all that now. We've had I don't know how many meetings now about committee business. We haven't laid an egg yet. We heard the commissioner on request of Mr. Généreux, Mr. Beaulieu. It's true the commissioner came, but the reason he came was to summarize what he'd done up till now. It was 2 hours, but he didn't talk specifically about the motion by our colleague Ms. Lattanzio. Personally, I'm from New Brunswick. 5 meetings is certainly not enough for every question I'd like to put about all provincial jurisdictions in the country, because the motion doesn't involve just deficiencies. during the pandemic in communicating information on public health. It's also deficiencies among other jurisdictions. There are 10 provinces and 3 territories, as far as I know, in this country. And now we have 6 meetings, if I understand correctly. And the clerk tells us that this week's already lost. So at best, if we ever do want to lay an egg as a committee before Christmas, it's the next 5 meetings we have left. Is that correct? Okay. That's what I understood. I don't know if my colleagues had a time to read the report by the commissioner entitled A Question of Respect and Safety. I think 5 meetings is not a lot. We have to bring forth lists of witnesses for the poor clerk who's going to have to orchestrate all this very quickly, because 5 meetings goes quickly before the session is finished for this year. I won't say I wanted 6 or 7, 5 understand, but we have to go ahead. Let's get rid of, not get rid of, that's a bad word, but let's make good use of the 5 sessions we have left. Let's all agree. We've agreed on that motion. And during that time, I would officially or unofficially invite people to give everyone a chance to have this fused motion. It's so important. So important that when we get to 2021, that's what we'll attack on. That's what I'm proposing, but we really have to lay the egg. It's becoming embarrassing. There's all kinds of glitches because of Mr. Blaney, who appears in person. He's the only one, and that causes the main problem. Anyway, I'm calling upon all of you as people who have an interest in our official languages. For the pandemic, we have 5 meetings. We only have 5 meetings to discuss New Brunswick, my bilingual province. It has its faults, but go look at the report. It's embarrassing. Ontario, it's embarrassing. I could talk about Saskatchewan. There's a French newspaper, and the government advertises about public health in English only, in the only French newspaper in Saskatchewan.
This is without mentioning the gaps in our place where we work in the federal level. So, Mr. Chair, I will listen to the clerk's wisdom. 5 sittings. I was going to originally ask for 10, but I will agree to 5 sittings. Let's have witnesses come from the provinces and the federal departments that interest us. Let's be extremely efficient and strategic. Let us complete this study for 2020. And colleagues, if we can't work together and come up with a hybrid fused motion between Ms. Ashton's motion and the ones by Ms. Lalonde and Mr. Beaulieu, I think we will have failed our mandate on this Official Languages Committee, because we need to ensure that first thing in 2021, we need to be able to hear witnesses and have real sittings. I don't know what more to say, Mr. Chair. To resume, I'm going back on what I said before. I will agree to 5 sittings only on this motion, which we unanimously adopt, and let's lay an egg, so to speak, as quickly as possible. Let's produce a report. And let's move on to the next motion, which I believe will be important to all political parties around this table. And this motion I'm talking about is Mr. Beaulieu's motion on the impact, so to speak, of legislation on official languages, French in particular. I'm not sure if I expressed myself clearly, but I know we all have our hearts in the right place. We need to move forward. Thank you. Mr. Arsenault. One precision, the technical problems, were not the fault of members. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Blaney. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I understand what Mr. Beaulieu was asking for was to agree on 5 sittings. to look into the pandemic's impact, and I think that enhancing Ms. Lattanzio's motion is entirely reasonable. Let's come back to what Mr. Arsenault said. Mr. Arsenault, being himself, of course, a New Brunswick francophone, spoke, and the Francophone and Acadian Federation wrote to this committee, and Mr. Arsenault would like for us to lay an egg, so to speak, and I'm sure that that product should be the Modernization of the Official Languages Act. And Mr. Arsenault, I'm sure I can trust and have confidence in your being a member of a minority community to want to modernize this act. I think that what we understand is that, of course, we do have minorities in Anglophone provinces. We also have the Anglophone minority in Quebec, which deserves to be fully respected. But with the throne speech from your Prime Minister, Mr. Arsenault, I would say the Prime Minister of Canada, we have a new minority in Canada, and that is the Francophone minority, which is mostly in Quebec in the context of North America as a whole. And this is why we're impatiently waiting for the modernization of the OLA. So I am in agreement with Ms. Lattanzio's proposition, and I agree that it is up to the committee to prioritize studies. I think that this committee's priority should be modernizing the OLA. And since this committee has already held informal discussions, we said that the motion was not adopted yet, but it can be adopted soon in the next week. And we should focus on the decline of French in Quebec and in Montreal. This is a new responsibility that we have on this committee. I would like to take up this discussion, and I know we've had bad luck, we've had technical difficulties, for example, but I think that we can move forward. And that is what Canadians are expecting. That is what our minorities are expecting. And we do have members who were ministers in provincial governments on our committee. We have representatives on our committee of minority language communities. And I'm a Quebecer, and I represent a minority in North America. That is to say, Francophones in North America. So I agree with Ms. Lattanzio's motion. I think we should have a productive meeting, and I hope that once we get to the bottom of the list and everyone will have said their part, we'll be able to agree on the motion. And I think that there are a lot of extremely relevant motions that still have not been discussed, and we need to put them on the table. As I said, we have had some difficulties, but I think we can overcome them. So let's make the right decisions this afternoon. Let's make the right decisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Blaney. Now, Ms. Lambropoulos, the floor is yours. Mr. Chair, I would just like to say that my colleague Ms. Lattanzio's motion is extremely important. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's the second wave. We don't know when the second wave will end. But the study she raised is extremely important. And I think it's crucial for us to begin right away. That way, we'll be able to ensure that Quebecers outside of Quebec and Anglophones within Quebec will receive at least the services to which they have a right in their official language. We have, or you have, 6 committee meetings left before Christmas, before the break. I would say that that's perfect because Patricia's motion proposes to carry out this study over 6 sittings. You could even clue up the study before the end of the year, which would help numerous Canadians. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lambropoulos. Now, Ms. Lalonde, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I much enjoyed my colleague René Arsenault's intervention today. And Mr. Blaney, you also brought up many important observations. To that effect, I think that it's important to consider the following. We're in Canada. We're in a pandemic. It's the second wave. Each of our jurisdictions have to make decisions to move ahead with the health measures that they choose. I believe that the Official Languages Act is extremely important. In Ontario, at least, you saw what happened with the former commissioner who was independent, and unfortunately that job was abolished by the Ford Conservative government. But he found that there was a decline in the language. We are now experiencing, and this is the case for many families, many individuals, many seniors in long-term care centers, this reality. And Ms. Latanzio's motion could elucidate certain important things for us, and I think that we would be able to produce a report. Doesn't that mean that we should agree on a relevant agenda for January, for when we come back? And this is exactly what Mr. Beaulieu, Mr. Blaney, and Ms. Ashton are trying to accomplish. And I think everyone on our committee wants to establish that that language is very important. And I have a motion that hasn't been debated yet. But I think that at the next sitting, we could pass it on consensus. I think we should at least begin with what we're experiencing right now, and that's the pandemic. And we could have begun our work on October 13th. And we must come up with something tangible for the communities that we represent. I represent Orleans, and I have one of the largest Francophone communities. I represent them with pride. And I think Ms. Latanzio refers to this in her motion, so I hope I will have your support. I think we'll be able to agree on the number of sittings, the 5 sittings. But I think we need, dear colleagues, a working plan to give to our clerk and our chair so that we can get started on the witness list for the next 5 sittings. And this is what my dear colleague, Mr. Arsenault, was getting at. And that way we'll be able to group the witnesses, come up with a consensus, and be able to table something in January. And in all honesty, I think 5 sittings should be sufficient for what we're aiming to do. And I'm not sure if this is a compromise or not, but I would like to have some collaboration so that we can keep moving and produce a report and move on next year. Thank you. And here is the list: Mr. Duguid, Mr. Arsenault, and Ms. Ashton. Mr. Duguid, the floor is yours.
Chair, and I wasn't able to attend the last meeting of the Lang Committee because of a conflict, and I'm sorry I missed it, but it sounded like a very, very interesting meeting, and you know, we're having a discussion about the study, the number of meetings, the witnesses, all very, very important, and I'm really going to defer to the consensus on the appropriate number of meetings. I do worry that 5 might not be enough, and really hear me out in my rationale. You know, I am sitting here in Treaty 1 territory, the homeland of the Métis Nation. We have a significant Franco-Manitoban community. We are very proud of that as a nation. Manitoba is celebrating its 150th anniversary, brought about by who? One Louis Riel, who we have a day named after here in Manitoba. So we're very, very proud of our Métis heritage, our French heritage here in Manitoba. But Mr. Chair, Manitoba is in code red, deep code red. We have the highest infection rate per 100,000 people in the country. We went from 0 infections in the summer to now thousands, literally. Mr. Chair, some 60 or more deaths in long-term care homes. We have invited, or the Premier asked to have the Red Cross sent to our province, which we have done. And they are in 4 or 5 of these long-term care homes. And Mr. Speaker, you know, one of the big infection areas, one of the hot spots is southern Manitoba, where we have significant Francophone populations who are not getting the kinds of services that they need in the language of their choice, and in that case, French. As I've pointed,
Comme je l'ai signé.
we have had challenges in our education system with not being able to find enough French-speaking teachers. And we have the same problem in terms of healthcare professionals that can speak French. And Mr. Chair, I'd just like to read from a very, very important study, Access and Youth of Healthcare Services in the Minority Language, by a number of distinguished authors from the University of Ottawa, the University of Saskatchewan, and the University of Moncton. And I think the honorable members will be very interested in this, because you know, our challenges in healthcare and in serving our minority communities really predate the pandemic, but have only grown worse. And I quote from this.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mon
Mr.
micro
Chair.
était fermé. Oui, monsieur.
Oui, Monsieur Blaney, you have the floor. The fact that we have 5 sessions on one motion, perhaps Mr. Duguid could tell us whether he agrees or not, because we won't be doing this study in the amendment to the motion. I think he wants to stretch things out, but could we move forward? Canadians are watching us and are waiting for results, because we'll still be discussing this motion between Christmas and New Year's at this rate.
Mr. Chair, I think the idea, and it sounds like Mr. Blaney would agree with this, is that we leave this meeting with a plan to carry out a study, the number of meetings, the witnesses, and that is what I am speaking to, Mr. Chair, and that wasn't a point of order on the part of Mr. Blaney. So I will continue. And I repeat, I lost my place here, Mr. Chair, but it speaks about our 2 minority language groups. And given their linguistic minority situation, communication between these communities and healthcare professionals, as well as their access to services, may become hindered. Studies carried out in Canada and elsewhere have shown that the presence of linguistic barriers can limit the access to health services, including preventative care, and impact patient satisfaction, the quality of medical care, and health. Linguistic barriers represent a hurdle to providing adequate follow-up care to patients, especially when these services are largely based on communication. And Mr. Speaker, this is so important in the middle of a pandemic. Access to health services by official language minority communities has been investigated in some Canadian studies. For the
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Yes, Mr. Généreux, go ahead. I would agree with my colleague. If Mr. Duguid wants to invite the author of this report, we'd be pleased to hear them, but I think we have what we need. We have to decide who are going to be the witnesses, when are they going to come. We're not here to read reports today. We're here to determine what we're going to do in the next few weeks. We don't need to hear all this. We know it's a problem. We want to stop it. We don't need to hear it today. We want to hear witnesses who will discuss this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Généreux.
You know, I think what I have been talking about is very relevant to the discussion, to the number of meetings, to the kinds of witnesses that we are going to call. And again, Mr. Speaker, that was not a point of order. Where was I, Mr. Speaker? Because I don't want to repeat and waste the committee's time. But Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, for the Francophone communities in a 2001 study by the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes du Canada, the FCFA, which has been referenced today, they showed that access to health services in English was 3 to 5 times higher than access to health services in French throughout the country. Data from this non-scientific study were compiled following 300 interviews and group sessions with Francophones working in the healthcare sector selected from 71 communities. Mr. Speaker, I think you get, Mr. Chair, pardon me, I think you get the picture. This study is extremely important. Communication is absolutely vital to providing quality health services, particularly in a pandemic. And Mr. Chair, this is why this study is important, and it's really, really important that by the end of this meeting, we settle on a group of witnesses, we settle on the number of meetings, and we proceed. And as a number of members have raised today, although the phrase doesn't quite work in English, laying an egg has a different meaning in English, as far as I know. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duguid. So now, je passe la parole à Monsieur Beaulieu.
I'll give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu now. I think for all those who are watching the meeting right now, it's quite clear that the Liberals are just being obstructive here. I have a proposal. We've made compromises. We've included Anglophones, Francophone and Acadian communities, and we also want to discuss the impact of these things. A point of order, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Arsenault, a point of order. I appreciate Mr. Beaulieu's comments, but aren't we discussing the order of things in Ms. Latanzio's motion? Isn't that what we're supposed to be discussing? If so, I would like to propose an amendment, if colleagues around the table want to listen. That's not a point of order. Inaudible. Mr. Beaulieu, please go ahead. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. Yes, can you hear me? Yes. All right. The proposal that I put forth would allow us, for the first time in the history of the Official Languages Committee, to examine the situation of French in Quebec. We understand that our Liberal friends don't want to do that. They're talking about both sides of their mouth at the same time. They say, yes, we accept Law 101, but in their actions, we see that's not the case. It's just an attempt here to smoke and mirrors going on here. I won't speak too long, but it's quite clear that this is parliamentary distractions, and the only point here is to add 5 meetings. A minimum of respect would be to allow everyone to put forth their proposals and then set a priority on those that we agreed on at the informal subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, that's not a point of order. I'm sorry, Mr. Arsenault. As I said at the last meeting, let's not talk about subcommittee meetings because inaudible. I understand that we've had discussions among us, but let's concentrate on this motion. That is the motion about 5 meetings. Once again, there's nothing indicating that that's the calendar. We're adopting a motion. If it's adopted, then we discuss how we're going to undertake our studies. You have the floor, Mr. Arsenault. Okay, you can all hear me? Ask for a vote, Mr. Arsenault. So we're talking about 5 meetings. I propose that we have this motion by Ms. Patricia Lattanzio. That's what we're discussing right now. In the storm of the pandemic, it's something that we should do. We all voted on it unanimously. Let's take the rest of 2020, the rest of the meetings, 5 meetings. That's what I'm proposing as an amendment to the motion. And that's it. That's my intervention. 5 meetings as soon as possible. I'd just add 5 meetings to amend the motion. Go ahead. Just a moment. Mr. Arsenault, your intervention is not clear. Mr. Arsenault, can you hear me? Very poorly. Please finish your intervention. What you want to say is not clear. Okay. I'm proposing, because we're talking about 5 meetings, but it's not something that was officially amended in the motion by Ms. Lattanzio. Yes. No. There's no debate. Continue, Mr. Arsenault. Continue. And let's make this a motion. 5 meetings. According to the availability of the clerk, let's take advantage of the 5 meetings we have before the end of December to invite the witnesses we need. Point of order. If we're not talking about the calendar, Mr. Arsenault was talking about the calendar. Look, these are interventions we're making on Ms. Lattanzio's motion about 5 meetings. That's what we're discussing. Mr. Arsenault, your intervention, as I understand it, is that you agree with the 5 meetings that are included in that motion. Is that right? On the list, I have Ms. Lattanzio, Ms. Ashton to close. Ms. Lattanzio. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, to clarify this, a point of clarification, let's say, what I understand is that the proposal at the outset that I had was 5 meetings. You said when we began the meeting that there were 6 meetings, so I imagine usually we need a meeting where the report will be finalized and produced. That's why I proposed 5 meetings. Now, I'd like to clarify the intervention by my colleague, Mr. Arsenault. I don't think it's an amendment because we're talking about the same number of meetings. So I'd like some clarification on that so that we can go to a vote as quickly as possible. And secondly, am I to understand that this list is one that we would submit tomorrow so that we can start hearing witnesses as of next Tuesday? I'd like clarification on that, and then I'll let members digest all that. Thank you. So for your clarification, once again, as I said, it is the committee that will decide on the calendar of meetings. Right now, we're debating this amendment to your motion. So now, Ms. Ashton has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't take a great deal of time. I'm preoccupied by the fact that we've already wasted a lot of time. I'd like to express the fact that I'm disappointed that this discussion at the subcommittee took place. I know that's not being respected today. It wasn't official, but we shouldn't be wasting time in what we did. We all took about this. Mr. Duguid talked about the crisis, and the armed forces came to our riding yesterday to help with the COVID-19 crisis that we're experiencing. Let's not waste our time. We can all ask for respect, but to my mind, one point of respect is to not waste our time. And let's respect even the informal discussion that took place at the subcommittee. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ashton. I now have Ms. Lalonde, who was added to the list. Yes, with all due respect, Ms. Ashton, I'd just like some clarification. During the last session, as you recall, there was an informal discussion between you, or the informal subcommittee, if you will. There was a collaborative meeting, and if I remember, one of the members of this committee decided to create upheaval to table a motion again. It had not been discussed in a friendly manner. I tried to adjourn his motion, and I remember very clearly, Ms. Ashton, that you had refused, and all Conservative members had refused. So I'd like some clarification today. Yes, I'm prepared to vote on Ms. Latanzio's motion with pleasure so that we can finally start doing things on this committee. Okay, for the time being, we will go on to a vote. Could you read the amendment, Mr. Chairman? I'm told that in the proposal it was already 5 meetings. Could the proposal by Ms. Latanzio be read to us? The original proposal and the amendment, please. All right. Thank you. Now, first of all, I will read the motion.
Brièvement, la motion que nous avons adoptée, c'est...
Briefly, the motion we adopted is the following: that the committee study the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the government's ability to provide information in both official languages, that the committee also look into the way in which other jurisdictions faced this challenge of communication to minority language groups and the impact on these groups, that the committee look at which policies and measures were put into place to help those communities during the pandemic, and for the committee, and that the committee create a report, and that the committee request a government response to that report. Would you also like me to read the amendment regarding 5 sittings? Or Ms. Latanzio, rather, would you read that for us? Ms. Latanzio, I would like to add that the committee have at least 5 sittings to be able to hear testimonies and carry out the aforementioned study, and that the list of witnesses be sent to the clerk tomorrow, so November 19th. Very good. That is the motion we will now be voting on. The clerk is in the room. Let us please move on to the vote. Are there any objections? Mr. Chair, excuse me, tomorrow is the 20th, so before the 20th at 5 p.m. Thank you for that clarification. I have a point of order. If we say that it's before tomorrow, November 20th, does that mean that the motion affects the calendar?
Bonne question.
That's a good question, Mr. Beaulieu. Wait one moment. I will consult the clerk. because there was a debate earlier and there were a number of speakers. And Mr. Beaulieu, I understand. Just as you say, it wasn't a matter of the date, whether it be November 20th or otherwise. So I do understand where you're coming from. I will have a word with the clerk. Ms. Latanzio, could you please clarify the motion as you presented it at the beginning of this sitting, please? Ms. Latanzio, that we should have at least 5 sittings to be able to carry out the study of this motion, and that we begin the study beginning next Tuesday. To clarify everything, I wish for the work to start next Tuesday, which is November 24th. Members will be given the opportunity to speak. The way I understood it, we had mentioned 5 sittings, and we had also said that members should send their list of witnesses to the clerk as quickly as possible, and the clerk confirmed with me that if that list were submitted tomorrow, it would be possible to begin this coming Tuesday, if that is what committee members wish, given the calendar. That is what I wish for us to vote on at this time. Has everyone understood? A clarification, please, Mr. Chair. So I understand there would be 5 sittings, that it could begin on Tuesday. Yes. That is correct. 5 sittings, and members must, as quickly as possible, send the list. Point of order. Mr. Chair, I think the motion is quite easy to understand, and I would say to my dear colleague, Mr. Beaulieu, that everyone here agrees that we have done nothing since October 13th when Ms. Latanzio tabled a motion. We need to start working. I think I was very clear earlier, and that is what Mr. Beaulieu seems to wish to do as well. Point of order, Mr. Chair. No, Mr. Blaney, please let me finish. Ms. Lalonde, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Blaney called a point of order. I am listening. Mr. Chair, you were very clear. We are going to vote on the motion regarding 5 sittings and that the list of witnesses be sent tomorrow. To prioritize committee's work, you said that this decision was the committee's to make. If that were to change, it would invalidate the entire conversation we had, and that would not be respectful of the rules. And Mr. Chair, I propose for us to extend the meeting 15 minutes or so, because I want for us to be able to agree on a game plan. I think we have excellent staff here who are also looking forward to getting to work. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Ms. Lalonde, before I let you continue, I do have an intervention by the clerk. So unfortunately, just a few moments, I will have to We're starting the sitting again. So to be very clear, once again, Ms. Latanzio tabled a motion. It pertained to holding 5 sittings and submitting the witness list as quickly as possible, that is to say by tomorrow. And that is the motion that was debated, and that is the motion that we will vote on. And afterwards, given that we're short on time, we will speak about what study we will do. Point of order. Go ahead, Ms. Latanzio. I believe the members of this committee clearly said today that we want to move forward and get into the work, because there are other motions that we also need to look at. I tabled my amendment earlier, and if I understand well, the list of witnesses must be submitted tomorrow in order for work to be able to begin on this coming Tuesday. I would like for everyone to be clear on this. We all want to go ahead. So 5 sittings. We should be able to carry all of this out before the holidays. And that way we can get on to other business that is very interesting. And we will also need to debate those other motions and vote on them as well. So, Mr. Chair, I want for us all to be clear on this motion. We're talking about at least 5 sittings. The witness list should be submitted by tomorrow, and the study will begin next Tuesday. And this is why I asked the clerk how much time she would require. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Latanzio. And that is correct. That is what the discussion between the clerk and myself was pertaining to. And yes, you correctly said that lists should be submitted as quickly as possible for us to be able to start the study. But the dates were not in the original motion, and that is why the decision now is to take a vote. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beaulieu, what Ms. Latanzio said was not the same as what you said. Well, Mr. Beaulieu, the decision is this. We're going to move on to a vote on Ms. Latanzio's motion that asks for us to hold at least 5 sittings and for us to submit as soon as possible, that is to say by tomorrow, the witness list to the clerk. That is the motion we debated. And I did also say that the intention was to start a study as quickly as possible, as soon as possible. And right after we finish voting on that motion, we will decide on which next motion to begin on. And if the committee wants to begin as soon as possible, we will have to decide whether we're going to talk about a different motion, and that is the current context.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. You're putting the calendar back in this. I'm going to vote against because that's not what we debated at the outset. It was 5 meetings, and now here we're putting dates. We're going to have to decide this in 2 motions. There are many other motions on the table. I don't think we can vote on this one right now. Mr. Beaulieu, what I said is that we're going to vote right away on Ms. Latanzio's motion, which says 5 meetings, and submit the list of witnesses by Friday to the clerk. And I'm stopping there. And then it's up to the committee to decide which study we will undertake on Tuesday. Okay? So, Ms. Clerk is in the meeting room. To proceed quickly, I'd like to know, for this motion of 5 meetings and submitting the list of witnesses quickly, is there any objection? I'd like a recorded vote, please. Okay, so Madam Clerk, please, could you proceed with a recorded vote? Fine.
Arsenault.
Aucune objection, Monsieur le Président.
Monsieur Duguid.
Je vote pour.
Madame Lalonde.
Je vote pour.
Madame Lamopoulos.
Je vote en faveur.
Madame Latanzio.
C'est sûr, je vote en faveur.
Monsieur Blaney.
Je vote en faveur de la motion.
Monsieur Dalton.
Je vote pour la motion.
Monsieur Généreux.
Je vote pour la motion.
Monsieur Williamson.
Oui, moi aussi, je vote pour la motion.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Pour la
Madame Ashton.
Je vote pour la motion.
Donc 11 oui, 11 yeas.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So the motion has been passed unanimously. So dear colleagues, it is 5:33 p.m. I know we had some technical problems, unfortunately, but there are other committees. What I propose is that we have a maximum of 10 minutes so that we can stop at 5:40. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we can proceed. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. I'd like to table my motion, for which there was a notice of motion. It's a motion that seeks to have a study on the situation of French in Quebec for Francophones and Anglophones, including the situation of Francophone and Acadian communities, and look at the impact of the Official Languages Act and Law 101 to defend the French language, and see how we could integrate that with everything going on, how this can be integrated in the modernization of the Official Languages Act. Okay, thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. So amongst ourselves, do you want to discuss this motion? And there was an informal discussion. Well, I think we could go on to a vote. I wanted some clarification on which one of the motions you are tabling. The second one that I tabled. I can read it if you wish. Yes, go ahead. That in accordance with Section 108(3)(f) of the Standing Orders, the committee undertake a study of the measures that the government could take to protect and promote French in Quebec, not only within Quebec, outside Quebec, but in Quebec, that the committee have a detailed picture of the Francophone community, including Francophone and Acadian. French is a mother tongue, the main language spoken at home, linguistic substitution, main language of work. B, evaluate the effectiveness of the government's linguistic policies with the objective of protecting and promoting the French language, as well as the impact of these on provincial legislative measures to protect and promote the French language, particularly the Charter of the French Language in Quebec. C, evaluate possible amendments to the Official Languages Act in order to harmonize the government's will to protect French with legislative measures in provinces, that we have at least 7 meetings and that these be completed at the latest on March 1st, 2021, that the committee report on its conclusions and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a global response. I think that it's important. With regard to the pandemic, we've already had studies by the Commissioner of Official Languages, the Federation of Francophone and Acadian Communities. I think the time has come to act on that issue for public health, and people should have the right to be served in French and English. And I think that now we should tackle this study. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Now, I'd like to open a parenthesis here. Did you submit a copy of this? I looked through my documentation, and I don't know if I got a copy. Yes, you already received it as a notice of motion. Okay, I don't have it with me. I have 2 interventions here, and as I said, I'm going to have to stop you because this will be the end. have Mr. Blaney, Ms. Lalonde, and Ms. Latanzio that want to be added. Mr. Blaney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to speak in favor of the motion put forward by Mr. Beaulieu. I think that this is a motion that is quite urgent. We have to act on it. And I would add that, indeed, we're all concerned by the pandemic, but it's also important to see how, as the Official Languages Committee, we can concentrate on our priority. That is to ensure that all our communities, especially given the reality in Montreal today, there's a feeling of urgency. I think it's extremely important. I would submit, Mr. Chairman, that it'd be interesting to hear people from Statistic Canada. They could be called very quickly because these are people who are available. They have the data, and we need a portrait of the linguistic aspect of communities, be it Anglophone communities in Quebec or minority communities in Anglophone provinces. And now the new minority community is the Quebec community in North America. StatsCan has all the data necessary about the French language. I think it'd be easy to invite them very quickly to start the work, and that would be one meeting. It would give members a chance to prepare a list of witnesses. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, because it's 5:40, so the House of Commons cannot accommodate us, so je dois arrêter là.
So I have to stop there. At the same time, I remind you that following the adoption of this motion, you have to send a list of witnesses as quickly as possible. Given the wishes of the committee, I want to point out that together with the witness, it is the duty of the chair to decide whether we begin a new study Tuesday. I have a point of order, Mr. Chairman. 30 seconds, Mr. Beaulieu. I was very clear. It was clear we were not deciding on the calendar. So next Tuesday, we continue to examine the proposals. Point of order. Look, I'm sorry. Mr. Vice Chair, we have to stop here. Well, you indicated when you would adjourn the motion, so I invite you to suspend the meeting so that we can continue, because this was just tabled. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Madame Lalonde, I'm sorry. I'd like to adjourn the debate, and I'd like us to work as quickly as possible next Tuesday. I know that you will have a difficult choice to make, but an enlightened one. I adjourn the debate. There's a motion first. I'm sorry, Mr. Beaulieu. When there is a formal request for adjournment, I must go to a vote. So if there's a request to suspend first, there's no debate. How can I say, yes, we can discuss it, but there's no debate on a motion to adjourn, but I have to go to a vote immediately. So unfortunately, is there any objection to adjourning? Yes. Vote. Madam Clerk, please, could you proceed with a recorded vote, and then we will take the decision for this meeting. Let me clarify. The vote is on the motion to adjourn the debate? Yes. Okay. Mr. Arsenault.
Absolument. Adjournons le débat puis travaillons.
Mr. Duguid.
Adjourn.
Madame Lalonde.
En faveur d'adjourner le débat et qu'on commence à travailler.
Madame Lambropoulos.
Qu'on adjourne.
Madame Latanzio.
On adjourne et on commence à travailler.
Monsieur Blaney.
Je vote contre l'ajournement parce que j'estime que je ne peux pas comprendre que les libéraux votent contre une motion pour enquêter sur le déclin du français au pays.
Monsieur Dalton.
Contre.
Monsieur Généreux.
Contre la motion.
Monsieur Williamson.
Contre la motion.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Contre la motion qui est une tentative d'obstruction, encore une fois.
Madame Ashton.
Contre la motion et choquée par le désir des libéraux de mettre fin à une telle importante conversation sur le déclin du français.
Donc, nous avons...
So we have 5 yeas and 6 nays. I'm sorry, 6 nays. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Therefore, the motion was defeated. Therefore, I am adjourning the debate. I'm sorry, I'm suspending the debate. Goodbye and have a good